Welcome, and thanks for listening to Cherry Bekaert's Government and Public Sector podcast series. In each episode, we hear from the best in the business on the latest challenges, trends, and opportunities affecting the government and public sector. I'm Christian Fjellgraf, leader of Cherry Bekaert's Government and Public Sector industry team. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for joining.
Welcome, everyone, to the 2024 Uniform Guidance Updates with Robert Shea. This is episode 3 in our Grants Management podcast series. This show will focus on 2 CFR 200 Uniform Guidance Updates and how these changes will affect governments in general, also nonprofits and public entities. Most of the folks listening to this podcast are grant and accounting professionals, and we live in a very dynamic environment, and we know this. If you are new to grants, these changes that you're seeing with the uniform guidance may seem daunting and scary, especially if you don't even have a handle on previous or ongoing regulations. Us more experienced grant pros are used to constant change in grants in the grant world, but even so, this is a pretty big one. When you get right down to it, it's not so scary. It was time for a change. It was ready. We were ready for the updates. And today I have just the right guest to break it all down for you so it all makes sense and it's not so scary. So I am Kat Kizior. I'm a grant management and compliance senior associate at Cherry Bekaert. I'm also a certified grants management specialist, and I have over 25 years in grants management and grants accounting. And I am extremely excited to introduce our guest today, Robert Shea. Robert is a government management and policy expert with GovNavigators, and he had his own podcast, actually, the GovNavigators show, which I have listened to and my nerd and grant accounting brain really loves. So thank you for those. I've listened to several of them, and they're very informative and entertaining as well. So he and his partner discuss government and management issues on their podcast. Check it out. So Robert, thank you so much for coming to talk with us today and give us the down low on the new uniform guidance. Would you fill us in a little bit on your background in government and regulation and policies?
Well, after hearing yours, I'm totally intimidated.
Oh, well, you should be.
So I started my career in the House and Senate Oversight Committees, the U.S. House and Senate Oversight Committees, so overlooking the operations of government, including where it spent money, much of which is through grants. We also tried to measure and reduce improper payments, improve performance management reporting, and basically make the government work better, more efficiently. I then joined the Office of Management and Budget, where I led what was called the Office of Performance and Personnel Management, where, among other things, we built and oversaw the government's performance management and reporting framework. We also oversaw the government's personnel practices, and we developed a thing called USA Spending, which is a website that reports all of the government's financial transactions, including grants. So I've spent a lot of time examining the data we need to collect, and the practices we use to oversee grant spending. I left OMB in 2008 and joined Grant Thornton's public sector consulting practice, where I led their strategy practice. So really focusing on government at every level, improving its performance and efficiency is where I spend my time.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm the one that is intimidated. Thank you for that. So let's just jump right into the uniform guidance updates. So the Office of Budget and Management released its revisions to the Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements on April 4th of this year. These updates were implemented into the Code of Federal Regulation, which is CFR, on April 22nd. So Robert, can you review the major changes to the uniform guidance that will affect non-federal entities receiving grant funding?
Sure. Glad to do that, but I also want to make sure folks know that there's just a ton of information available online. I applaud OMB for going through a pretty open process where it published draft guidance in the fall, solicited copious comments from folks, and you can actually go to the Federal Register and see how they dealt with all those comments. More importantly, we should probably reschedule a podcast to read through this. There's a 446-page addendum that shows the red lines to the previous uniform guidance. So if you really want to nerd out and see a red line version of the document, it's right there. But mainly, just at a high level, some of the things you can see is a focus on tribal nations. There's a specific call out, and this is part of the administration's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, making sure that funding opportunities, grant opportunities are clear, available, accessible to tribal nations. There's also, you may have heard about this, a federal program inventory. I think the administration's been required over time to develop a list of the programs that are in the government. It's been really hard. OMB has taken a long time to fulfill this requirement, but it should be a list of all of the programs through which people can apply for grants. And it's supposed to make it easier for applicants and potential recipients to find the programs, oversee them, and ensuring the funds are being spent wisely, and generally increasing government transparency. NOFOs are a big focus, notice of funding opportunities. You've read a lot of them, and not all of them are as legible, understandable as they could be. There's a concerted effort to make sure that we're improving the accessibility, readability, clarity, and design of notice of funding opportunities, because it's a real barrier. If you got a big city with a large infrastructure that helps you apply for these things, and you've done a lot, it might not be so hard. But for those with fewer resources who haven't done this a lot, it can be really hard. So the administration is making sure that NOFOs are much more readable, clearer to folks. The supply chain is a big focus of this uniform guidance, and agencies are being instructed to ascertain to what extent grant funding is going to American-made products, goods, and services, and that we identify gaps where grant recipients are having a hard time accessing American-made goods. Subrecipient reporting will remain a focus. So grant recipients should look out for more rigorous data standards and reporting requirements related to subrecipients. And then core data elements. All of the data elements will be continually revised to meet this guidance and evolving requirements. Treasury's got that obligation, and so folks should look out for evolving data elements and reporting requirements. And then single audits, you saw that they've raised the threshold from $750,000 to $1 million. So those receiving less than $1 million won't be required to be subject to audit. Doesn't mean agencies won't be required to oversee those recipients, doesn't absolve them of those obligations, but that threshold is raised. So those are like some big picture changes that the administration called out in its overarching memo, but they've also got some interesting guides. They've got reference guides, one dealing with evaluation, one dealing with data, one dealing with community and public engagement, one related to those, notice of funding opportunities that I mentioned, one related to labor, and then one related to burden reduction. There's a real emphasis that this ought to make it easier to access, use, and oversee grants. So I know I'm a little long-winded there, but I hope that answered your question.
It's okay. I have many follow-up questions for you. So one of the things you talked about was the single audit threshold increase. So we have had a lot of questions from entities, from clients about when they are expected to follow the updated cost principle guidance. So they are worried about their 2024 audits. How does the 2024 compliance supplement tie into the revisions, and will the single audit be affected by these changes? Do you have any guidance on that?
Yeah, well, it's important to note that the threshold applies to awards made on or after October 1st. So that's a simple one. We don't have to wait for a compliance supplement for that requirement. But I empathize with folks concerned about the application of this guidance to audits in the absence of a compliance supplement or updates to various cost allocation guidelines. NASAC, the National Association of State Auditors, Comptrollers, and Treasurers, sent a nasty gram to HHS recently. I don't know if you saw it. They sent the secretary a letter bemoaning the continued delay in approval of statewide cost allocation plans, SWICAPs. There's a 4-year backlog in the approval of statewide cost allocation plans.
Yep, I've heard that.
So the resources that agencies, especially HHS, have to devote to this are limited. So I'm really bullish about the changes to the uniform guidance, but I also understand that there's a significant limitation in how fast the government can go to do all the things it needs to do to flow down these changes and to bring the auditors on board. So I wish I had something clearer to tell you. I was with the head of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy just recently. We had heard her say that updates to how they're going to fix this backlog were not weeks, not months away, but longer than that. We knew that couldn't be true, but she confirmed that that's likely the case. So I think we'll have to wait and see just when those various flow down documents, guidances come out.
That's very helpful. I think that'll clear up at least a little bit of the confusion that folks have with when things actually happen and when things go into effect. So I know I was sitting watching the April 4th Office of Budget and Management release of the updated guidance, and you spoke a little bit about this with the federal entities and how they are supposed to now use plain, clear language. I heard that term several times as they spoke. How is that significant to the recipients of the grants specifically? Just besides clarity, is it just clarity, or are there other really good aspects that's going to come out of this?
Well, I mean, if you look at the memo that OMB released, it's like it was written by some sort of graphic artist. So guidelines for simplification include enhancing readability to align with visual and user experience design principles, including topographic hierarchy, optimal line lengths, supporting imagery, icons, and photos, use of color, bullets, tables, checklists, as well as digital bookmark and jump links for ease of navigation. Now, you write all your documents like that, don't you? So, I mean,
of course.
Basically, they're trying to be real sophisticated about taking customer experience principles and applying them to NOFOs. These should be accessible to wide audiences who use a lot of different platforms. The application process should be likewise easy to navigate. Instructions should be simple to follow. So I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know, that this is intended, and they haven't fixed it yet. They haven't fixed it. So this is an ongoing priority of the Office of Management and Budget to really completely transform the grant applicant experience so that we get a broader pool of applicants who go away thinking they've had a much better experience engaging with the government in this way.
Great information. Great information. So what are your key takeaways from the show, and for our grant and accounting professionals, what's good for them to take away and share with their peers?
So at the risk of being repetitive, I think grants should be getting simpler. It should be easier to apply for them. Complying with reporting requirements should be easier, and we should have a much more engaging relationship with those overseeing grants management. That's one. The second, again, at the risk of being repetitive, statewide and other cost allocation plan approval is going to be a continued bump in the road, and I just those who can put pressure on policymakers to make this a priority should, phone a friend, make sure they're bringing this attention to Congress, the agencies, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And the third is the focus on evidence and data. This is where I spend a lot of my time. The guidance has this paragraph, which I love. Costs related to data and evaluation are allowable. Data costs include, but aren't limited to, the expenditures needed to gather, store, track, manage, analyze, disaggregate, secure, share, publish, or otherwise use data to administer or improve the program, such as data systems, personnel, data dashboard, cybersecurity, and related items. Data costs may include direct or indirect costs associated with building integrated data systems for the purposes of data collection, reporting, and evaluation. The evidence-based policymaking community, of which I consider myself part, fought really hard to ensure that language was clear, because friends of mine, Kathy Stack, Jonathan Womer, Jonathan's now at Rhode Island, Kathy is an independent consultant, have produced a paper that inventoried various jurisdictions who have leveraged multiple grant funding streams to invest in their central data systems so that they can report more easily, they can assess grant programs better, and conduct rigorous evaluations. So that group is producing a field guide. They've got working groups at the federal, state, and local levels, all of whom are helping to ensure a really clear guide that jurisdictions can use to help pull some of those funds in to build this sort of data evidence building infrastructure. I'm a little long-winded again on that point, but I think it's really exciting.
Well, it's important. It's important to know, and I hope that you are absolutely correct that these changes and updates will make it a little easier on grant professionals, make the language easier for people to understand. I mean, we have seen since 2020 an amazing amount of grant money drop. And we've also seen an amazing amount of new grant managers, grant professionals, people who have never worked in grants before. And it's its own language.
Yeah.
And trying to learn it and try to sort it through all the difficult language it just makes it hard. So I surely hope that this does help take some of that burden off and give some more comfort to some of those folks working in grants, that they can actually understand and be compliant with their grants. So this was amazing. I call this grant professionals mind candy because my mind is all full of sweetness right now. Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing your invaluable wisdom and your insight. And thank you for all you do to help out our governments. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Well, thanks for nerding out with me on this. I really appreciate it. And I so admire what you do. The only thing I would add is that I guess depending on how we did, I'll be back again at Cherry Bekaert's virtual conference on August 7th and 8th, where this will be just among many topics that are covered. It's a great service y'all do, and I look forward to participating in that.
Thank you so much. I look forward to us going through the red line compliance information, because that, again, 444 pages of grant stuff. It's
Better
right
you
there.
than me. Better you than me.
So thank you so very much. If you would like to contact me with questions on the podcast or request any particular grant content you feel would be valuable to share with the world, you can email me at kat.kizior, Kizior, @cbh.com. Thank you all so much for listening, and catch up on all our grants management podcasts at cherrybekaert.com.
This is Christian again. I hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to our next one. Don't forget to subscribe.